Welcome to the Dental and Mental Podcast. I'm Dr. Galen Detrik.
I'm Dr. Davina Detrik. And we are going to be talking to you about the business and the mindset of dentistry.
Welcome to the Dental and Mental Podcast. I'm Dr. Galen Detrik.
I'm Dr. Davina Detrik.
And we're back for another episode. And this one, where are we going? Tell me.
Oh, I know exactly where I want to go.
That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. So last night you wrote an email.
I did. In these shorts, actually.
You've been writing emails for almost a decade now.
A lot of emails.
A lot of emails to the people. You talk to the people a lot via email.
I do talk to the people a lot.
And last night was interesting because you were really like, hey, did you read the email? Did you read the email? And because I'm reading so many of these emails, I was doing things I hadn't got around to it.
Yeah, you were ignoring me.
Yeah, I was putting you on D&D. But when I did read it, I said, this is the best email you've ever written.
You did say that.
It was fantastic.
It's very kind of you.
It was absolutely fantastic. I thought it was really brilliant.
Why did you like it? Why did you like it? But why do you say that? Why do you say it's best? Because you're probably talking about 1,000 emails
right.
that you read.
So here's the reason why I thought it was the best. I thought it was the best because I think that you did such a brilliant job of breaking down somebody's thought process into a formula and really being able to say, if we change these variables, then we can predictably expect this result. And so what it did for me, not only was it entertaining, because the storytelling I thought was fabulous. The storytelling was really good. But because you were able to break it down into variables, what it did was it removed a lot of the emotion that I see people make when they're making a decision.
Or not making a decision, right? That's a big piece of it, is staying in indecision.
So that's far more accurate. I think that what it did was had very inspirational storytelling paired with a very logical progression of thought that removed emotion, allowing somebody to be able to say, do I take action or do I not? So that's why I was like, this is absolutely brilliant. For somebody to be able to read that email and still stay kind of in a stuck cycle of wandering the desert for 40 years, then I assume that you didn't actually read it.
Which I actually mentioned a couple times in the email. I want people to pause and stop, right? And kind of say, this is a place where you might start to just kind of gloss through an email. And it's like, stop. I need you to read this. Because it did, I think I asked you so many times to read it because that email took me almost 2 weeks to write. I think sometimes people, if you're on email lists for anything dentistry, it's usually like, check out this product, we're running a discount on X. Like, that's fine. But my email list is a lot more, I guess more purposeful, I hope.
Right. The way I look at your email list is you're not just throwing trash out to people.
It's coaching. It's like me coaching you through an email.
Right. I think that's exactly what it is. It's not, because a lot of times, and we've been in a lot of groups, a lot of email marketing groups. Yeah. And there is a point of view where it is volume, not necessarily quality, so that you can get enough reps in to eventually get to the place where the volume becomes quality.
That's the idea.
That's the idea, right?
More of a lie, but that's the idea.
Right, that's the idea. And the reason why it's a lie is because if you practice shit time after time, you continue to get the same output, right? You just practice getting faster at writing shit.
Yes.
Yes,
succinctly put.
Right. So I'm saying that because I think that because your emails are such a labor of love, this email really hit on a lot of pain points that I think people are really feeling. And I think it put it in such a way where it became very black and white, removed a lot of the emotion, and asked somebody to confront the question, what do you want next? And what are you willing to give for it?
Right.
And when we've had really fantastic coaches, when we've had fantastic coaches, that's what they've been able to do for us. A lot of our coaching relationships haven't necessarily been comfortable. Actually, they've been very uncomfortable.
Well, no, most of them were actually, somewhat painful, actually. A version of suffering.
Really, really painful. Really painful, because you have somebody confronting you with this or that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess for context a little bit, because many of you listening to this podcast have probably read the email because you're on their email list. But if you haven't, the context was I'm going through a 7-part email series. If you're not subscribed, you should subscribe. But the first piece was really about how we're stuck in this achievement cycle, right? And I think we've been born and bred to believe that achievement is a very good thing. And I don't even necessarily malign it or say that it's wrong, but I think achievement for achievement's sake is actually a part of the doom cycle that we're all a part of, right? It is chasing something that you actually never, ever catch. And so it's no wonder we're depressed and anxious and stressed and tired and fatigued and indecisive and hesitant, right? It's like, to what end? What are you doing this for? And then the second email was really about how the whole get routine is not the right way to go. I tell the story of Nim's Die and 14 Peaks. And really where that goes is this concept of having a purpose behind something, but it's not even like the why or the purpose. It's like, this is what you would live and breathe and die for. Right.
And also having, to which you pointed out in this email, skin in the game.
Yeah.
Right. It's not, I want to try something, and if it works, fantastic. And if it doesn't, like, oh, well,
right,
on to the next.
Right.
I think that when you wrote the email about NIMS, it paired really well with this email because you pointed out something that separates people from greatness, which is skin in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It came under the banner of sacrifice, which is really just a way of saying, what are you willing to give or give up? Right. And that's life.
Can you tell the story? Okay. So if you have not watched 14 Peaks, to the listeners, you've got to go watch that. It's on Netflix. It's absolutely fabulous. This is coming from somebody who doesn't even like to walk, and I loved watching that movie, right? So
that's awesome.
I'm the most sedentary person you will ever meet in your life. And
that's not true.
And I loved watching this movie. It was like
we actually went on a spree of things, like alpinist and free solo, and,
right? And Meru, right?
Oh,
so yes, so I really enjoy watching other people do physical activities, I guess.
Yeah.
But the point of it, so I want you to set up. So if you haven't watched that movie, please go and watch that movie. But just set up Dawn and the story and kind of what you came to in your email as the conclusion of Dawn and Nims and these two characters on this mountain.
So Dawn is an alpinist. He's a mountaineer, very, very accomplished climber by all means. And grew up in Colorado. And so he's summited at this point in time, when I'm writing the email and at this point in time in life, he has summited, I believe it's 4 of the 14 peaks. And there are 14 peaks in the world that rise above 8,000 meters, which is really high. So there are these kind of illustrious, very dangerous peaks that people try to climb, they try to summit. And Don had been trying to climb Annapurna. And Annapurna at the time, 2022, had a 33% mortality rate. So literally 1 in every 3 climbers that tried to climb it died.
Wow.
And that's, I mean, you stop to think about that. That's crazy. This isn't just like people trying to climb.
Right.
These are very veteran, legitimate climbers for the most part.
Right.
And it's because it's a very finicky, capricious mountain. There are rock slides just randomly, avalanches, wild stuff. Weather's completely fickle, it does whatever it wants. And so people have a very hard time climbing it. And so Don had tried and had failed 5 times. And so in the email, the way I kind of position is he is climbing it for now the 6th time. This is his 6th summit attempt. And it just so happens that he gets to the top this time. And he gets to the top, and you could be like, damn it. All right, man. Perseverance. That's it, right? If you set a goal and you aim to achieve it, just don't give up, buddy. Just keep going. And while that sounds like a great message, there's some context that you miss, which is that Don was not alone on that mountain. The variable, the factor that changed, was the presence of Nims Dai and his team. So who's Nims? Nims is this climber that no one's ever heard of at this point in time. And he is from Nepal, and he's a Gurkha. Okay. So which is a certain type of badass military group. It's actually a tribe of Nepal, but they were known for, and they had notoriety as incredible military agents. So he was in that, and then he was also in the Royal Guard, or I think he was in the military in Special Forces in London. And so he's UK Special Forces, and ends up kind of having this crisis of belief where he's like, I don't want to do this anymore. I've climbed some mountains, and that's where my passion is. That's what I want to do. And he becomes very obsessed with this idea that all of these Sherpas are not, they have no names, right? All these Western and European climbers summit with the absolute help and almost exploitation of these Sherpas. And he's like, hey, ain't fair. This is wrong. And being Nepalese, he wants them to have a name. He's like, if you got to the top, you should say it was me and this person. And you should give credit where credit's due. So he becomes obsessed with this. Plus, he also is just an avid climber. He finds a love for it right away. Behind all that, he's also just gifted, right? He has chemical makeup, which allows him to do things that pretty much no other human being that we know of can do, right? I mean, expert Olympic swimmers and badass CrossFitters cannot keep up with his endurance and the amount of oxygen saturation that he has. So it's amazing what he's able to do. So he starts out on this idea that he wants to climb all 14 peaks. And at the time, the record was 7.5 years to climb all 14. Why? Because weather's crazy, right? Permits, crazy. Lines, crazy. All these different factors. And that was fast. 7.5 years was crazy fast. And because before that, it was like 14, 15 years. So he says, I'm going to do it in 7 months or less. And people were like, yeah, all right, buddy. Sounds great. And he sets out to go do this thing. And the emails about how he has this plan and this obsession and so many obstacles that come his way. I mean, he's a nobody. He's absolutely nobody. No one cares. No one's going to sponsor this guy. He ends up having to pull out a second mortgage on his home just to fund this trip because he calls and calls and calls. And by the way, it's not you don't ask for money, given our last podcast. Right? About asking.
He was asking.
It's like who he had become in order, what he had to sacrifice on the inside. We think about sacrifice like giving money or time, whatever, but most sacrifices are actually an internal dying to self. It's something that you don't want to give up, right? A part of your makeup, your personality.
It's because it's easy to give what you are willing to give.
Yes.
Right. So we can't call that that's actually that's not what a sacrifice is at all. If you're willing to give it, it is not a sacrifice. It has to hurt.
Yeah. There's a verse in the Bible, and it talks about that love is not loving somebody who's lovable. It's loving someone who's unlovable. It's your enemy, right? It's the person you're like, no, forget that person. Curse them, right? That's actual love. It's easy to love someone that's lovable. So yeah, anyway. So Nims has all these odds stacked against him, leverages his own money, goes against, and we've had clients that way. We've had coaching clients where we start to walk them through how to grow their practice, do more of the dentistry that they want to do. And the thing that's the hardest for them is to present treatment in excess of a certain amount, called $3,000. Why? Because it feels like you're taking from somebody else, and that in their culture, that is what it is, right? So how do you fight against that? well, you have to completely rewire who you are. And I think that's lost in the documentary, actually, in 14 Peaks, of how hard that must have been. That might have been one of the hardest things he actually did the entire time, was learning how to ask people for money.
Well, the other thing that was really difficult is culturally, he was to be the person who was to take care of his family.
Correct.
Financially.
As the youngest. Yep.
Right.
You stay back.
Right. And he had security within his military profession. So when he walked away from that, that was a huge break from the cultural dynamic that was supposed to be stable for his brothers, his mother, he absolutely loves and adores.
Right. Yeah.
So the break from his family, on top of the financial risk, on top of the breaking of family tradition, he sacrificed in all of the ways.
It's everything we ever learned from David Nagel, right? Is that you want to be successful? Well, you say that. But what it will cost you, are you willing to pay? And that's really what this third email is about. But that's the hardest question you'll ask. Because for most people, it's easy to set a goal. It's easy to set a dream. It's easy to achieve in some way, shape, or form. It's really hard to give up who you're addicted to being, or who you're environmentally shaped to become,
or who you're comfortable being. The comfort is the thing that's a killer.
Yeah.
Do you remember David saying, I remember him saying this, I'll never forget it because I thought it was so fascinating. He said that in all of the years that he had been working with people, if somebody had a safety net, if somebody was funding them, if they had a retirement, inheritance, an XYZ,
trust fund,
right, that it was extremely, extremely rare for that person to be successful.
He actually went so far as to say that those were his least favorite clients. He almost got to the place where he didn't want to work with them anymore because they wouldn't, when it came right to it, they would not do what he asked them to do. Because
there was nothing at risk.
Nope, nothing to risk.
So if it's like, hey,
no skin in the game.
Right. So if I need you to go make 30 sales calls today, those are the people who would say, well, that seems like it's elective. Because it's not like, well, if I don't make these 30 sales calls,
I lose something.
Right. I lose something. It was, well, if I don't make them, I'm going to be fine.
Correct. Yep. So fast forward, NIMS has enough funding to that sort of thing too. He wants his Sherpas to be paid well. Right. Yes, we're going to make sure that your name is a name that's remembered, but he also wants you to be paid well. So he's really trying to rewrite the narrative for the guides up those mountains. And he wants to do it in a way where they're going to get notoriety. Well, how do you do that? You set such a wild and ridiculous goal, right? That people have to talk about you. You know, it's that crazy. So the very first mountain they're going to climb is Annapurna. So he's at the base, and so is Dawn. And they start to climb up. And they're about, I think around 7,000 meters at the time, 6,500, 7,000 meters. And they're about to make their summit push. And Don looks at NIMS and he says, I don't think we're going to make it this go round. And he's looking to turn around. And he says this. I mean, this isn't conjecture. He said this to NIMS and in the documentary. He's ready to give up. And NIMS says his infamous line that everyone's now very familiar with. He says, giving up is not in the blood. It's just not in the blood.
Isn't it not in the blood, brother?
Yeah. Giving up's not in the blood, brother. Not in the blood, brother.
I could hear him saying it. Because there's something that while you're risking your life, right? I can even feel my blood pressure watching this movie. Your blood pressure is through the roof, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But there's something so cheerful about him too, where that optimism of no, we're doing this.
Well, it was even more than that. It's it was get up.
Right?
What are you doing? Stop your pity party. Stop whatever you're thinking. Let's go have a good time, you know? And it's something that person can, it's a belief that people can gravitate towards, and they see something in themselves that they didn't see before. Quick side note, but I actually got an email back from one of our readers.
No. Tell it later. Tell it later. Because
okay,
I'm that
cliffhanger.
Right. Because that is so such a sweet.
We'll finish with that. Actually,
that's what I was hoping for. Okay. That's such a sweet moment to this whole story.
All right. Yeah. That'll be our tail end. Okay. So they summit, right? And I make the point in the email that Don had practiced giving up 5 times in a row. And Nims had everything to lose. He had his family. He had all of his reputation. He had his job that was secure that he gave up. He has second mortgage. He's about to lose his house if this doesn't work. He has the belief and the trust that all these Sherpas, his friends, have put in him. They've placed in him, said, I believe in you. We're going to go do this thing. If he turns around and they delay that mountain, they may never get a chance to do that again. There goes the goal. It's done. It's over. Mm-hmm. And what did you just train those people? Like, now we gave up on the first one. Ooh. And the things that he goes through, I'm not going to go through them all, but like climbers dying in his arms as he's trying to stay with them. Like he's in the military. You don't leave anyone behind. Every other climber's out there for achievement. They're out there for a name, for fame, for whatever. And I shouldn't say everyone, but that's largely what it became. And he was trying to change that, right? And he was committed to it. So time and time again, Nims is climbing these mountains and doing what no one had ever thought was possible. To the degree of even being about ready to climb K2, he shows up with all of his crew, and there's 24 climbers at the base. And they're like, no one's getting up this year. No one's been able to get up. Weather's too crazy. And he's got his, giving up's not in the blood, brother. So they're hungover. They party with everybody. They get him in high spirits. They're like, it is possible. And everyone's like, it ain't possible. And him and team the next morning get up, hungover, and they climb K2. And they come back down, having set the ropes. Yeah. Right? They set all the ropes, come back down, and they say, it's doable. We just did it. And everyone now is like, oh, I guess it is. Mm-hmm. And guess what happens? All 24 go and summit. And so it's a story of this man who brings people with him, and it's a gravity, it's a force of nature that you can't escape, right? You have to deal with. And that's really different than Don, who's a talented climber, good guy, has accomplished many a thing, but you see a difference in the tenor and the fiber of who these men are.
And what did Don say? I wanted to say there was an interview with him that you had.
Yes. Yeah. He has his infamous line. So while Nims is giving up's not in the blood, Don's was the mountain had other plans. And he was asked why he goes up and even tries to do these things. And so he says two things. They're like, why do you even risk your life trying to climb mountains? And he says, I don't know why. Isn't that interesting? Mm-hmm. I don't know why I do it. And then when asked why, it was so hard and why he turned back at times, the mountain had other plans. This is a person who did not have a North Star. This is not a person who had everything on the line, right? That there was no other chance. There was no other choice. The ships were burned. You did it or you died. That was not Don, but that was Nims.
To full circle, this is kind of David Nagel's point of, well, if you have a trust fund, you're like, well, I can go, I cannot go, I can make the calls, I cannot make the calls. Right. La-di-da.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you're curious about accessing that next level of your network, then ThriveX is the place to be. Head over to thrivedentist.com and click on the ThriveX tab. Hit apply, and we'll see you soon. Ships aren't burned. I actually have a couple of jets waiting for me in case I can't make it. Right?
Right. And to your point, nobody would look at Don and say you're a loser, right? To your point, this is an accomplished, right? This is an accomplished climber, a seasoned, skilled professional. This is not right. But to really be able to tap into greatness, there was skin in the game that one had and one did not.
And I think that is the difference, right? I mean, we look at you have Jordan and you got Pippen and you go through every different person like this where you're like, it's not to take away from one person's talent, abilities, and accomplishments.
Right.
It's just that we don't associate them with greatness, and there's a reason why. And I wanted to illustrate what that reason why was, which is you don't have a purpose and a why and a calling that is so obsessive and deep that there is no turning around for you.
That it's all chips in.
Yep. So the third email, the one that you liked so much, is very, very concisely, I I related it to, it's an equation in physics, and it's an equation for gravitational force. And if you can see this in your brain, F, which is the force of gravity, equals G, which is a gravitational constant, times the mass of the first body and then mass of the second body, divided by the distance between those two bodies squared. Okay, don't have to remember that. But the point is that we're trying to solve for this force of gravity. Think, how do you magnetize something to yourself? When two bodies come into orbit with one another, one's going to win. They're going to pull in because of gravitational forces. So I liken this to our ability to manifest, create, pull into our orbit the thing that we want, our desire. How do we crystallize that thing, right? You want an amazing practice. And I think that's a really important point. As a side note, you can read these stories of NIMS and Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan and Steve Jobs and Florence Nightingale and you name them. And you're like, cool for you, not me.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we like those stories. Those are the stories that we write movies about, that we write books about, that we watch documentaries about. We want that. But somehow we see them as very different. And that's accurate in one sense. They are different. But I guess the question that I asked in the email and I asked myself is, why would you be content not to be different like they are? Why would you be content to be less than great? What is that? And this equation helps you to realize what your future holds. That's the title of the email, right? It's like, this equation tells your future. And it does. Because in this equation, F, force of gravity, is really what you're willing to give. That's the force, actually, of attraction. What you're willing to sacrifice, what you're willing to give, is what is going to determine M1, which is you. M1 is what kind of person are you willing to become? Are you willing to become a NIMS? Are you going to get on phone calls that you don't want to get on? Are you going to present treatment that you don't really want to present? Are you going to spend money with mentors that you don't really want to spend or that you don't feel like you have? Mm-hmm. Are you going to max out a credit card? And it's scary as hell, which we've done. Mm-hmm. And are you going to do that because you know that the ships are burned? I know what I want. That's what it costs. And guess what? Now's the time. It's asking for it right now. You don't get to say, how about in 6 months once I've saved up enough? That opportunity is gone.
Right.
It's gone, right?
As a quick caveat, if as a listener you want to know the story, we have it saved as a highlight on the Thrive Dentist Instagram. Mm. We have screenshots of our bank accounts, cars that we've sold, all of that. So I want to just say that because that is all documented. If you're in a place right now where you're like, what in the world? Go look at our story.
Oh, yeah. $89,000 in credit card debt, $24 in the bank account, kids.
Yeah.
One car share between us, getting dropped off at a juvenile detention center.
Yep.
That was our life.
Yep. Sold our cars, didn't own a home, didn't have any assets.
Zero.
Right. Yep.
And that was the price of admission. And the point of the email is to say, this equation you can solve any way you want. It's just that F is the only thing you're ever really going to be changing. It's the only variable that you actually have control over. Mm-hmm. Is what you're willing to give. So if you're like, well, I want to be successful, but I don't feel like spending the money and I don't really want to be told that I'm wrong because I'm the one that's right. And I have pride that gets in the way. And you're not really willing to put in the effort and the hours, meaning there were times where you and I were putting in 20 hours a day while you were 8 months pregnant, right? Putting in ridiculous amounts of time, exhausted, dead. And that's what was required.
Right.
Could have easily been like, I'm too tired right now. You have to get back up, right?
Right.
NIMS could have been like, oh, I'm hungover. Let's do it another day, right? And maybe that window of weather that did allow, because there are conditions that are actually impossible. You couldn't climb in certain conditions.
Right.
That window was available and he was willing to go up even though he felt the way he did, right? You have those in your own life as a dentist. And there are patients that you're talking to and that person might leave your practice tomorrow. And that could have been that case could have been the one that really helped you solidify a skill set. So now you got to wait. The next person comes. There aren't full arches coming into your practice every single day.
Right.
Right? There aren't people with brown bags of cash coming to practice every single day. There aren't people who are willing to say yes to what you want and what you think that they need every single day. So we miss opportunities far more than we think we do. And God's blessing to us and curse in some ways is that we aren't really familiar with the things that we missed.
Right. Oh gosh, can you imagine if you knew?
If you knew everything that you missed,
all the opportunities that you missed.
Yeah.
That would be incredibly painful. I mean, we talk about that when we see people miss them. Like, gosh, they'll never know.
Never know.
Right. And we'll never know. There are opportunities that you and I have missed that we'll never know about.
Because it's not just one thing, it's connected to the point of our previous podcast of networks, right? That invitation could have turned into this, and you could have been a different person in each of these places. And the point is that you're never really solving for G. You're never solving for M1 or M2 or the distance between those two things. You're actually solving for what you're willing to give. That's the only thing you can ever truly change. And when you're willing to give more, F becomes larger. So if F is larger in this equation, that means that R squared can actually get smaller, right? We're solving an equation, which means the distance between those two things, who you are and what you want gets smaller.
Shortens.
Who you become becomes bigger. The goal that you have, top of the equation, can get bigger. If you're willing to give more, the things that you want get bigger and the things that you don't want get smaller because of that one thing. So are you willing to sacrifice more than you're comfortable with?
And I think the counterpoint to that is, if you're not, then be honest about that and stop pretending.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right? Because
Exactly right.
That's a fair conversation to have too.
100%.
I think it's a really reasonable thing for people to say, I don't want that. I don't want to risk it all. I don't want my back against the wall. I'm not willing to give it. That's totally fine. But if you have that conversation with yourself, that's a good conversation to have, because then you can be clear about all the striving that you're doing that is toil and for zero.
Yep.
Right? You can't keep pretending that you're going for the thing when you know you're not really going for the thing. Let yourself off the hook and say, you know what? I'm a person who wants comfort and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Absolutely
fantastic. But if you're a person who wants comfort, but you're not okay with that, that's crazy making, and that will drive you absolutely insane. That's to your point of your first email.
Love that.
You will chase and chase and chase because you're a comfort lover who thinks you're not.
Perfectly put. I love that you bring that up, because that is, and make the point that if you are feeling, I mean, think about it. Look at people around us. We are highly, highly saturated with consumption and comparison and all these things that we're supposed to be and supposed to have. And you add to that the anxiety that comes from those things, the stress of, it's hard to live now. I mean, talk about America, things are expensive. We've talked about this. There's families that I don't know how you're making it.
Absolutely.
Right? It's so hard.
Right.
And you start stacking all this stuff up, and it's like fatigue, depression, anxiety, stress, blah, blah, blah. How much of it actually really does come from an inability to make that decision to either go this way or go this way, right? Settling has this bad connotation, but it could be that you don't really want to be the world's greatest dentist. Cool. Because there actually can't be 210,000 best dentists in America.
Right.
They can't be. There will be a handful that are amazing and several hundred that are great, but there's going to be a lot of in the middle. And that's okay, because you can definitely settle, as it were, for an equation that solves for a different type of F.
Absolutely.
Right? You want to give more to your family. You want to work fewer days, but you want to pour into your community. Like, it does not have to be about the skill set or notoriety or anything else, but it makes it emotionless in the sense that it can be a neutral choice. This is what I want. This is what it costs. Am I willing to pay this amount? And then just solve for what is that you actually want and what you're willing to give for that thing. Find that balance and go do the thing. Don't make it any more complicated.
Right. Yeah. I love that. I love that a lot, because what it provides is clarity.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Which actually, interestingly enough, you probably don't even know that the email series is 7 parts. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And what is C? C is clarity. People don't know what the names are yet. It's going to give it at the end, but now you know.
Oh, you're
C
like
clarity.
You're kind of like the Taylor Swift of Dennis,
Don't
right?
ever
I know he hates
Don't
he hates
ever
Taylor
compare
Swift.
me to that woman.
I know you hate Taylor Swift. But the point is that she has a reputation for like hiding little Easter eggs in her music and her stuff and like putting puzzles together, and her people love to solve it.
Oh gosh, Swift is.
Okay, so you got a response to the NIMS email from a dentist who is one of my former clients with a fantastic story.
Yeah, fantastic story. So she, her daughter's fiance?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Fiance was actually climbing Everest, which is just crazy. I mean, like, this person's reading my email, and the first thing was, she's like, I love NIMS, kind of have a crush on him. I'm like, me too. I get it.
As we all do. That's
we all do.
Yes, as we all do.
We all do. And so she says that her future son-in-law is climbing Everest. And on the descent, as people know now by actually the infamous photo of Everest with this crazy line was taken by NIMS, is one of the things that, believe it or not, started to skyrocket his notoriety, was taking this image and people being like, oh my gosh. And, it was just kind of wild. Anyway, it's packed. It's wall to wall, hundreds of climbers. And so you can imagine when weather is an issue, how a delay can really cause problems, right? From oxygen and everything else. And so on their way down, they were delayed and they couldn't make it all the way down to base camp. And so her future son-in-law got stranded with a couple of Sherpas up on the mountain and started getting really sick, very altitude sick, not feeling well. And his Sherpa got on the radio with NIMS. And NIMS talks to this gentleman, and he basically said, your Sherpas will die with you on this mountain. They're not going to abandon you. And I don't want my Sherpas to die. So man up and get down the hill. And I'm sure there was a certain tone to it and all the rest, but the flavor was, we'll die with you, but let's not die today. And, like, that's the kind of impact that he gets to have, right?
Oh, I feel teary-eyed even hearing that. Like, can you imagine?
It's beautiful.
It is. It really is.
But I think one of the things that we miss, and truly, I really think we miss this. It's easy to say, but it's so important. And it's that we're not here to get. It's easy to sell that. It's easy to talk about that. It's easy to think about what we get. But think about what he was able to give. A person lived. Multiple people actually lived because of, if that was a random person, he might not have cared, but it's NIMS talking to you on a radio. You don't think that means something to somebody who's in the mountain world? Of course. Who do you get to be? And honestly, who are you not becoming that somebody else needs you to become because you are unwilling to pay the price to become that person? And I think if we do not have that heart-to-heart conversation with ourselves and look ourselves in the mirror and say, man up, woman up, do what's necessary, pay the price, work with that person, buy that course, do the hard work, stay late, have that hard conversation, right? Say no to work, put up a boundary, spend more time with your kids. Don't let them go through high school and never have had those kinds of moments with you where you get to make memories and you get to pour into them and train them to be the kind of kids that become adults, that become productive members of society. Make those choices now. I tell the story, and we'll finish with this, of the Wright brothers versus Samuel Pierpont Langley, who literally no one's ever heard of. And I say at the very end of the email, they both made sacrifices. They just made them at different times. The Wright brothers made it when it hurt the most, but it would give them then the ability to create flight. And we all get to be the benefactors of that.
Right.
Samuel Pierpont Langley did not. And because he was unwilling to put his skin in the game and to risk it all, he's a nobody. And now what he gets to sacrifice is regret. And regret makes it for you. It will make that decision for you. It will sacrifice for you. And that is not the thing you want. It takes everything from you. The impact you could have had doesn't have it. Is that the person you want to be? I think it's a good question to ask.
Well, you and I talk about when we start with a new client, one of the things that we talk about is you will meet a different version of yourself throughout the duration of coaching, you will meet a different version of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been true.
Yeah.
The people, they come out on the other side because what we ask them to give is not a version of themselves that they had known before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is why it's partly terrifying.
Oh, yeah. You might not like that person actually where you are right now. Depending upon where you're at right now, if you could snap your fingers and see that version of yourself in a year, you might have judgment around that person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because that person's wrong. It's actually because that person's brave. And deep down, we judge people who are brave. We judge people who do hard things to achieve things that we don't think are possible. And if you could meet that person of you, you might be thinking that version of you, ooh, they were hard on that person on their team. They got rid of that person. Oh my gosh. Why? How? It's like, because it was necessary. It was necessary to become the next version of you, to employ another person that then had this impact and this, right? Like you don't know. You don't really know what success is going to ask of you.
Right. Yep. That's it. Well, and not to go off too much on a tangent, but culturally and societally, we're in a place where you can bypass that and get it another way.
Mm.
Right? You can bypass becoming a different version of yourself by adopting new versions of yourself that require no work.
Or putting out a false version of yourself.
That too, right? That too. And so those are all very seductive traps into thinking that you're becoming somebody different, but you're not.
I think that's why I tied it to an equation. Math is math, like you can't cheat it. It's immutable. So you can try, but all you're really going to do is delay, and delaying increases your debt, and debts grow with time.
Right.
So if you don't pay the price now, just know that it's no different than not paying your student loans. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it's bigger, right? That's the way debt works.
Right.
So you never really cheat it, and it's better to pay it now. It's hard, but I think that's why people work with you. They work with you in the same way that Sherpa called NIMS. There are times where you cannot believe enough. You can't see it. You can't see the other side, and it's a dark place. It's a frustrating place. People work with people like you because they want to be coached in those moments where they need it most, where they borrow and rent your belief in them until they can get down the mountain,
right,
or up the mountain.
Absolutely. And to that point, it's why we have our whole story on the Thrive Dentist account saved in a highlight, because you and I only have that belief because we've done it. It's really hard to believe somebody can make it through something hard if you've never actually done that and led other people through it. Mm-hmm. You can't fake that.
No, you can't. No.
Well, truly the best email you've ever written.
Thank you, lover.
We will have links. Can we link the emails below?
Yeah, 100%. Yep, and subscribe. There's 4 more to come. So if you're listening to this,
I just want a place for people to be able to see if they have not subscribed to the email list, to be able to get the first 3 parts.
Yeah, and I tell stories. Like, that's, to me, the email list is about bringing you into a world,
right?
Into a world that's non-dental, but has lots and lots of connections to the way you practice, and to the way that you parent and love your people. And that's the hope, is that there's some impact from that. So if you love storytelling and a holistic approach to life, then you're going to love the email list. And if not, then this isn't the place for you. There's lots of other places for you to be. Send us off. Thanks for joining us, guys. We'll catch you in the next podcast.
Bye.
Thank you for listening and or watching the Dental and Mental podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, or any others for that matter, feel free to tap that subscribe button on YouTube, Apple, Amazon, as well as Spotify. While you're there, why not leave us a review, up to 5 stars? And if you're on YouTube, go ahead and leave us a comment. Let us know what topic you want us to discuss next.
If you like what you heard today and you want to be involved in the Thrive world, from coaching to courses or just to connect with us, go to thethrivedentist.com.